All right, welcome everybody. Thank you for coming. We're going to be talking today about Eclipse Che, which is an open source project designed to make container native development super easy. We're going to be focusing, of course, on using Eclipse Che with OpenShift, as you'd expect, but it does also work, of course, with native Kubernetes. My name is Brad Mickley. I'm the person who runs product management for the Dev Tools group here at Red Hat. And
I'm Mario Loriedo. I'm a software engineer for that since two years, and I'm an Eclipse Che maintainer. I'm based in Paris. I'm Italian.
Yeah, hello guys. My name is Ilya. I'm also working on Eclipse Che and OpenShift IO integration for Eclipse Che. I'm located in Poland, but I'm Belarusian, so I'm happy to be here.
I'm located in Canada, but I'm Canadian, so that's a lot less interesting. All right. Okay, let's jump into it. So a lot of things have been changing and happening in the world of development over the last several years. Interestingly, there was an Evans Data survey last year, and some of the output of that survey, the results were, I think, surprising to a lot of people, even those of us who have been kind of living in the cloud native and container native development world. According to the survey, 90% of folks surveyed believed that their development tools would move to the cloud. Now, the cloud in this sense wasn't just public SaaS. It also meant things like OpenShift on-prem, a self-service, centrally hosted system. And 66% are, of course, adopting containers, and I assume that's not a surprise to anybody who's here, because if it was a surprise, you probably wouldn't be here. But with that come a lot of new challenges. There's things, anytime there's change, there's going to be challenges. Config and setup, when we've looked at it amongst our customer base, can take up to 24% of a team's weekly time. And that's because the applications we work on are getting more and more complex. It's not a case what it was 15, 20 years ago where I work on a Java application and it's Java from front to back, top to bottom. And so I need to get one version of the JVM and I get one version of an app server and then it's pretty much good. Now, as we move more and more towards microservices, an application could leverage 3, 4 different languages. It could leverage a variety of different infrastructure. All of those things change dynamically and almost constantly. So as a team, if we're working on a local host environment, we're all responsible for updating those as they go. And that takes, although each moment of update is small, as you assemble them, it becomes a big time drain. The other challenge is that 41% of folks surveyed said that what was holding them back from containers wasn't actually the production deployment. It was enabling the developers to actually use the container platform. That's, as it turns out, the harder part. Now, certainly that's not to say there aren't challenges in production, but if you think about it, a developer's laptop is not ideally suited to working with large-scale containerized applications. And yet that's where we're used to working. And so there's a kind of culture shift, a technology shift, and a process shift that is required in order to move people to this more container-native world. So Eclipse Che on OpenShift is really designed to help facilitate that, to make it very, very easy. It's going to accelerate the projects and the onboarding because it's going to allow the development environment to be containerized from the get-go. And if it's containerized, then I can basically create my containerized environment once, and then I can hand it off to any number of developers, and they can have their own replicas of that. Rather than them having to build it up themselves, they're simply clicking a link and getting the ready-made set of pods. It's going to remove inconsistencies, because now it doesn't matter if I'm on a Windows machine and he's on a Mac and she's on a Linux box. The containers are the standard, and so they remove some of that, but it works on my machine. The next stage of that, but it works on my machine, is the more difficult one to solve, which is, but it worked in dev, how come it doesn't work in prod? Or it didn't work in prod, how come it is still working in dev? How can I diagnose this thing if I can't break it in dev? And that's going to be a really interesting one that I think we're going to see a little bit of how Che can solve that as well. And the last is it's going to protect the source code. And this is maybe not immediately intuitive. And I don't want to overstate this one, because it's not like we're doing some kind of source code locking. The source code still lives in Git, as it would anywhere else. The only difference is that instead of pulling the source code down to my local laptop, which is a very difficult to secure device and easy to lose device, I'm keeping it all centrally hosted in OpenShift. And the centrally hosted OpenShift cluster is much easier to secure. And it's much less likely you're going to leave that in a restaurant. So, all right, so let's talk about Eclipse Che. Over to you, Mario.
Thanks, Brad. So now we're going to see some awesome feature. So I'm going to just show three major features that makes Che awesome to solve the problem that Brad was talking about. So the first one is the fact that everything is run in a pod. So that means that Che itself runs in a pod. So that's the instance of Che that we will be using during the demo that we'll see later. So you'll see that there is a first application that's Che itself, and then we use Keycloak and Postgre for make Che running as a multi-user application. And not only Che itself, so the Che server runs in a pod in OpenShift, but as soon as a user will create a workspace, this workspace will run in a pod itself. So the main benefit of this is that to define a workspace, you just need to define a Docker file. So that means that it will be easy to replicate your workspace environment because you just need to rerun a Docker image. It will be easy to share. It will be easy to modify, to maintain, to version. So it's really all the benefits of the containers in your development environment. So you'll be able to define your build and your runtime environments using containers, actually. The second awesome feature is the fact that the language support, so the fact that we'll be able to do autocomplete or find all references or go to definition. So all these will be consumed as API using the language server protocol. So instead of having, so if we want to add the support for a new language in Che, instead of having to create a library and to embed it in the IDE, we just need to start a new language server that supports the new languages, and Che will be able to communicate with this using the language server protocol. So that is really powerful, and the language server protocol is actually used by other IDEs and is getting a standard to introducing to supporting new languages in modern IDEs. The third feature is, since everything runs in the cloud, it will be so the user won't need to set up anything to set up his workspace. So if I want to share my workspace, so all my development and runtime environment with a colleague, I can just provide him a link. So you can put a link, for example, in the README file of your GitHub repository. So if somebody wants to contribute to my project, he will just need to click on that link, and a new Che workspace will be created with all the settings and configuration needed to build and run the application. So we'll just use that for the next demo. So this feature is actually, it's called the Che factories. So okay, these are the three this three feature that help developers to work effectively when they need to develop cloud application. So, but let's see a demo. So let's see Che working. So in the demo we'll just show. So we'll have a problem in a application that is running in production. So let's just open the application. Okay. So that's the application, actually. It's just a to-do application, the simple to-do application. And if I try to log in, okay, there's a message. So we have a problem in production. Something is going wrong. So the server is returning an error. So the application is, so it's a microservice. There are 5 microservices, so it's a quite complex application. We need to figure out where the problem is, and we need to fix it. So we are going to, okay, that's, so what we are going to do is that we are going to share the Che factory that will just load all the microservices source code in a Che workspace. That will help to build and run the application to verify that we can reproduce the error. Then we will be able to fix it from Che, and we'll be able to push in the Git repository the fix, and then the production application will be updated automatically. So that's the demo workflow. So for that, we have created a bug. So let's. So I've created an issue on GitHub for a new developer. So Ilya is joining the team today. It's his first day, so it doesn't know how to set up the development environment. So we have created an easy issue for him. So it's labeled good first issue. So Ilya, just go ahead and try to fix it.
Thank you, Mario. There is also a blocker label. So let's see how could I handle it. As you can see in the description, which is pretty good, I see in the bottom the link to the factory. So if I click it, I already have Eclipse Che account. So it's secured by Keycloak. So all I need to do is just to log in. So, and when I log in, what actually happens under the hood? That my workspace is created, but it's not a single pod workspace. It's a multi-service workspace, and different languages I use, like Go, Vue.js for front end. What happens under the hood? So if we go back to the Che namespace, you can see that there are quite a few ports are up. So for each port represents the microservice. So we have a port for user API, we have port for auth API, we have port for front end. So if I go back, it seems that the workspace is almost up and running. We need to wait quite a few seconds, but yeah, in a minute you will have the workspace fully set up. So let's see how would I be able to handle this first issue. So you can see that my project is imported, so all the source code located in a single repository. So it's a very handy pull request plugin. But you can see that I have all the microservices here in the repository. So for auth API, we use Go. You can see a pretty syntax coloring here. So for front end, we use Vue.js. So JavaScript is also colored pretty well. And what else do we have is the concept of commands. Basically, as you can see in my workspace, I have quite a few commands, and I can run each command, for example, to set up a front end. So let's do this. There is a palette for commands, and I can just do run front end. I need to run it in the front end container. So what actually happens is that application is starting. So, and it also creates a publicly available root. So if I navigate here, it takes a few seconds to root to be exposed. So if I refresh it, it's here. So if I try to log in, nothing will happen because actually I run only one front-end service, so it cannot talk to others. So what I do now is basically run the rest. So I can do the build. So user API is the Spring Boot application. So it's basically executing the mvn clean install. But I execute it in a separate container. So my main container with user API doesn't have the Maven, but I have a separate tooling container that does have a Maven. So if I do execution here, it will install all the Spring Boot artifacts, and we should be good to go. In the meantime, I will try to handle the auth API start. So let's do this. And I probably start the last one, which is the to-do API start. Okay, so the last thing I want to do is to start the user API. So I do the build in separate container. Now in the target folder, I have a jar available, and I can execute the user API start by simple java jar command. So you might probably wondering how the source code is shared among the containers, but we are on OpenShift. So we actually run in the production and development in pretty much the same environment. So by sharing the persistent volume, all the containers could share the source code. So it's not a problem. I do build in one container. I do run in another. So if I go back to the application and try to log in, so it looks like it's pretty much the same error that we have in production. So I can go back to my Che IDE, and I see the stack trace in the user API. So didn't receive required data from GWT token. Not really clear what happened wrong. So I probably need to go to the user API and try to figure out what happens. So I can navigate to the file, and it would be user controller. So you can see that there is a get user method, and there is runtime exception, didn't receive required data from GWT token. So something is definitely wrong here. So what I would like to do is to do a test-driven development. Hopefully there might be some test already there. Let's just check it. I can navigate to the test. Let's see, there is user API application test. Well, it doesn't do much. There is just a test that asserts that true equals true. So, but can I really run this test from the browser? And the answer is yes. So I can just execute the run test. And the experience would be pretty much similar to what you have in desktop IDE. So you see the output in the terminal, and you see that something is going on, and let's see whether this test would be okay or not. Yeah, definitely, it's green. But let's write something for our case. So I have a test ready to hand. So what actually happens? There is some problem with login. Since it's Spring Boot app, it uses Spring data. So I can open the navigate file just to explain what test does. So there is data SQL file, which actually defines the users which are in the system. So you see that the username is admin and his first name is foo. So what I'm doing in the test is basically I'm mocking some of the parameters for user controller and expect that when username is admin, then user controller should return the user with username with first name foo. So let's try to rebuild the app. So you see that I accidentally ran the build command in the container, in the Java container. And it doesn't work because Maven is not there. I cannot build. I do not need to drag Maven into my application. I need it only for build. So I need to run it in the Java IDE tooling. So while the build is going, I will go back to the user application test. So, and if I execute it, I expect that there would be failure. So that's the whole point of my test. So I will just do run test. And for some reason, I cannot run it from the editor. I'll try to run it from the, so it's also possible to run it from the context menu. So run unit test. And I really expect it to fail with the very same trace that we have in production. So it will explain that I'm on the right track. So let's wait a bit. Okay, it failed. Let's see the stack trace. So, and the trace is actually the very same as we have in production. So what I would like to do now is probably I will not handle this situation without the debugger. So I really need to figure out what's going on. And I can debug. I can debug in my browser. So what I will do now is I will start my user API in the debug mode. And it's pretty much similar. So for Spring Boot, the common way of doing debugging is you can have an extra argument for debug and specifying the port for debugging. So we expose it from our user API container. So what I do now is I will run user API in the debug mode. And as you already know, that my workspace is basically a set of pods. And each pod can see each other by their service name. So I will just run the remote Java. Yeah, so its user API is a service name, 8000 is a port, so debugger is connected. Now all we need to do is put some breakpoints. So let's put it here, because something is definitely going wrong in this method. So now what I would like to do is to log in yet another time. And we'll try to debug. Okay, so if I go back, I'm in the debugging session. So I can see, I can actually see all the variables. So I see that there is a request here. Okay, seems to be okay. So now let's do some step over, request attributes. Let's see what's in the request attributes. Seems okay and seems to be valid. Everything is okay. But for some reason it's failing. So now it should actually fail. So, and it's failing. And if I take a closer look, I believe there is just a typo, because request attribute validation should check whether it is null and not null. So it's pretty simple fix. So what I would do now is just rebuild user API. Okay, yet the same problem. So I need to do it in the Java IDE tooling, which has Maven. So I do running and building in separate containers. And in the meantime, I would try if the Okay, something is, okay, I think to be, no, it seems to be okay. So let's try to build it.
You're not in the right.
Yeah, I do. Okay, build success. It's probably just autosave, which is enabled by default, didn't catch up this stuff fast. So what I would like to do now is to run my test, my user application test. And now I expect it to be running successfully. So what I would do now is run the test. Yeah, is something weird going on? Okay, so okay, I probably need to terminate the debugging session because it's still in the debug mode. Probably it's a problem. Yeah, it's, for some reason it's constantly looping. Okay, let's try to execute the test one more time. Let's keep executing the test. Yeah, it's not expected. So what I would like to do now is just to terminate all the service because I don't really need him anymore. All seems to be okay because I seem to debug the problem and try to execute the test one more time. So hopefully now it would be running successfully. So it's single test. So as I said, the test was about that the username admin would have the okay. Let's try to execute it not from the IDE, but rather from the command. We could also do this. So from the user build command, I just keep the test to make it faster. So let's try to remove this flag and execute the run command in the Java IDE tooling. Let's see what happens. Okay, let's try yet another time. Maybe it would be login test. Since seems to be correct.
Stop the. You better stop the command before.
Yeah, but doesn't seem. Sorry, guys. It's sort of a demo effect, so we could probably stop trying to execute the test. So what I will try to do now is to commit my changes and see what's and provide a pull request, because I expect that the test would be executed successfully. What button? Yeah, I could try. So let's try to relog in. So it seems to be here. Okay, I think I understand what actually happens. So I probably do the build and execute the test, and it started to loop over and over again. So let's try to do the user API build. Yeah. It's in a separate container. Actually, all the pods seems to be running. Okay, let's try to do a Git commit. So it would be fixing my first bug. I'll do a commit now. Okay, it's committed to some time, and now I need to do a pull request, so I'll create a new branch, summit demo fix, summit fix, put some comment. Fix and login problem. And I'll press create pull request. So it pushed to origin repository, and it's created a pull request. So I can now open it in GitHub and preview my changes that I have made from Che. So it's test and the fix. And I'll try to ask Mario if he could possibly review it. And if it's okay to merge it in production. Even though the test failed, I think it should be quite okay.
Okay, that's not bad for a first commit. So yeah, to summarize, Ilya, in about 15 minutes, he has been able to start a new workspace in the IDE. We have all the project in the IDE, so he has been able to build it, to run, to verify running inside Che that there is a problem, so he could reproduce the bug. And so he has written, so he had taken a look at the test, at the unit test, so he had added a test that verified that there was a bug. So he could verify that the test was failing, so then he fixed it, and then he rerun the test. So we couldn't see that everything was fine. He pushed to production. So to production, he pushed he opened a pull request. So now we're gonna take the risk. So even if we haven't unit tested in Che, let's merge that. So what will happen is, as soon as the fix is, so the commit is merged, this will trigger an OpenShift, a new source to image build. So let's have a look at that. Should be here, builds. So yeah, it started a few seconds ago. So let's have a close look to this one, because it may fail, since it has failed in Che. No, it seems, yeah, cool. So the Maiden build succeeded, so hopefully that wasn't the problem of the developer. So it was, so we are actually using the nightly build of Che, so maybe there's been something that has been introduced recently, so it's not and that maybe have been the problem. But anyway, so the build has been completed, the image has been rebuilt, so it should have been pushed to production. So now let's reopen our application here. So let's see if, cool, so we could, thank you, Ilya.
Yeah, thanks.
So in a few minutes, he had fixed the production issue. So cool, really cool. Okay, so we have been through the demo. Let's continue with a few slides. So what we have seen here was Eclipse Che running in OpenShift origin. So in an OpenShift cluster, we can easily run it in Minishift, so also locally. But if you want to try Che, probably the easiest way to do that right now is just to sign up on OpenShift.io and use Che on OpenShift.io. So I will just show it rapidly. So that's OpenShift.io. That's a platform for development teams that has a bunch of tools to make life of developer teams easier. So basically, there is Che. So the IDE part is run by Che. There is a planner. So let's open the. Yeah. So there are a few. So there is a planner. So an issue tracker where you can log the team issues for your project. So you can see here I've created three issues. There is also the Jenkins pipeline that are linked to your application. So as soon as you create your project, you will be able to build it using Jenkins pipeline without any manual configuration, actually. It's just a matter of having a Jenkins file in your repository, and it will be run. And then there will be the possibility to have some analysis of the dependencies that you are bringing in your application. So to see if there are vulnerabilities. And let's have a look, just quickly look on how to access Che. So you need to go to the Create tab here, and you can just create a workspace. So what I did first is that I created the application. So it's really straightforward to create an application in OpenShift.io. So if you want to try it, just log there, and yeah, it's quite easy. So now the workspace is loading. I think we cannot see the message here, but so I guess that's it for that. So Brad, do you want to?
Yeah, I'll just finish up with a couple quick comments. So part of the reason why you're seeing so much about this at this summit is because Red Hat is actually going to be productizing and packaging Eclipse Che and then providing a supported option for it, so that if you deploy Che into your OpenShift environment, you'll be able to get Red Hat grade support, not just for OpenShift, but also for your developer environments inside. And that's important because, of course, with Che, you would have potentially hundreds or thousands of developers using this inside of your OpenShift cluster. All right. The basic plan for Che productization, I won't go into this in too much detail because a lot of it, frankly, is still in the midst of being worked out. Their plan is to get to an initial GA of the Red Hat productized Che by the end of this year. It'll be based on the current version, which is Che 6, which already runs in OpenShift, as you saw. But we're going to add an Ansible playbook installer to make it a little easier to get into. And then we're also going to, of course, make sure that the stacks inside of Che, which today are based from the community and so include a number of different distros, are based on RHEL and use middleware so that, again, you're kind of using a supported group of stacks. Moving forward from there, what is already being worked on in the Che upstream project is revamping of the IDE and the workspace model to take advantage of further advances in containers and Kubernetes over the past couple of years. So that's going to be happening, and that will then move into kind of a beta and GA phase for the Red Hat package product as well. All right, if you want more information, you want to see a little bit more, talk to us, you can visit us in the dev zone in the expo area today. The dev zone is kind of straight in when you go in the doors. And if you want to see more stuff that's happening in the dev tools market, then you can come and see my talk in an hour next door. All right. Thanks very much, folks, for coming. Thank you, guys.